Hello gamers, today I am reviewing the Azeron Cyborg keypad, a piece of equipment that comes from Latvia that aims to be superior to the keyboard by offering more commands at the tips of your fingers. But is it? I'll be looking at the build quality, functions, my journey of using it, and giving my thoughts on whether or not this is a product for you in this video. First of all, thank you to Azeron for sending this out to me, it was very kind of them. So to start off, let me explain what it is you're looking at. Your hand is placed on the palm rest and your fingers then extend to the designated areas, with each finger having access to multiple customizable buttons. Your thumb just rests to the side next to the thumbsticks. This means, unlike a standard keyboard, everything is within incredibly close proximity, reducing the amount of movement that you need to trigger any actions. So in theory, you should be a lot faster to respond as there's minimal travel distance for some things. Things like reloading and maybe utility usage would be a lot faster, as these things would require you to move your fingers off WASD and move to somewhere else on the keyboard. So what's great here is the level of customization that you have in terms of moving everything about. From getting out the box, everything is loosely held in place for you to make your adjustments so it's comfortable for you. You can then use the included screwdriver to tighten these up so that they remain in place if you found your perfect layout. Every finger here as well gets at least 5 usable functions. These can then be bound to keys in the software to whatever you desire, but I'll get to the software a bit later. You get between 24 and 29 programmable buttons in total. The majority of these are controlled by the flaps, which are using Azeron switches, and each of them are rated for 20 million clicks. And if any of them were to stop working, you ask? Well, there's actually a pretty decent amount of spares available on Azeron's website. The majority of this kit is 3D printed, so it's easy to take apart and replace components that might not be working correctly. In terms of the build quality, it's alright. I think there's only a few areas that cause a little bit of concern from my end. Mainly the 3D printed nameplate has a bit of a cake frosting look to it, and also the joystick can feel a bit fragile after applying a bit more force than usual. The final thing is the USB port. Not only is it using mini USB, but it's also rather hard to plug in and out, leading me to be a bit concerned that next time when I unplug it, the insides are just going to come spewing out. Despite those 3 things, everything else felt pretty great and well made. I guess there is a level of concern as there isn't a lot of moving parts here, that this isn't going to be the sturdiest piece of equipment, but it will at least survive being used for gaming. And as I mentioned before, you do get a good amount of spares available on the Azeron website. For the software, it is in some ways self-explanatory and also not. In the settings though, they do have the main feature that should be applauded, a dark theme. Now there's a lot of settings for this section that can be overwhelming, so I left most of this. In terms of the bind sections, it's easy to select what button you want to change. You click on it and then you press the key on your keyboard. However, this process could have been made a lot easier, I feel, if they had maybe laid out these buttons in a way that's similar to the actual product. Maybe overlay this on an image of the Azeron so it's easier to allocate each switch. They are in the correct location and everything, but when you're just getting started with this product, it's just another thing that adds to the overwhelming part, which is a word that will start to pop up a lot going forward. I did have a few thoughts going through this on what's the best setup. At first I tried having WASD set to the buttons on the actual pad itself and not on the joystick, so it's more similar to a keyboard. But after it not really working for me, I then moved to the joystick and then just kept the buttons to the remaining key binds. So in Apex I had the following binds. This seemed to be a more stable selection as I was keeping the most used keybinds close to my index and middle fingers. My biggest issue started to rear its head very soon though. I'd also tried a layout where my fingers would be performing the same action as it would on a keyboard. Again though, it wasn't that successful for reasons I'll get on later. The next thing was to work out positioning of the claw, how I wanted it positioned for my fingers. I basically kept everything somewhat separate. The sections at the top I moved away if I had nothing bound to them so they just weren't distracting. This was the part that I actually liked, as you could keep some in place whilst others you could be a little bit more flexible depending on your preference. The first thing I did was run around in the firing range to just get used to the movement and the various commands that were assigned to my paddles around my fingers. This had, however, already started to get overwhelming. Luckily for me though, I do have a second monitor, so it was easy for me to quickly refer to that whenever I felt a bit overwhelmed and would forget key commands. In Apex, and maybe one of the downsides with it being my game of choice, there's a lot of actions and some are a lot less repeated than others, which cause some issues in the game. I then jumped into a number of real games, and when actually playing I found myself starting to really mispress a lot of binds, and I mean a lot. This led me to my next issue when using this, learning. Because I have a number of years of muscle memory built up for FPS games using a keyboard, unlearning these regular finger movements was very difficult. For example, if I needed to crouch jump, I ended up pressing down on my pinky first by default, which would then either do nothing or put my gun away. I found that a lot of the time that I would accidentally just mispress something or hit the wrong flap by mistake, and then everything would just fall apart. And by that time, whatever function I'm trying to perform is now delayed. I end up looking like a right moron just standing still or just doing some dumb movement, using an ability or something similar. Now this leads to another issue. Because I had movement now on the joystick, I found that this meant that I had control of movement but not control of aim. For Apex, movement is pretty important and it's something that I normally utilise quite often. Good movement can keep you alive and get you out of sticky situations, but having control of movement without the control of aim meant that I was pretty much a sitting duck. My aim was compensating for movement that just wasn't there at all as well. For example, if in a fight you'd bust out the tried and tested AD spam, but on a joystick it's not really as fast and I'd be compensating for movements that just weren't there. This led to a very frustrating experience when playing games with it, to the point where I was just not enjoying playing at all, which leads to my verdict. I still believe that this is a very interesting piece of equipment, but for me it's just too radically different to what I'm used to. There's a high amount of trial and error involved, which takes a lot of time. When you take that into account when you're using it, you could then come up maybe with another solution to make things a bit easier, and then you're relearning everything again. There'll be many times when I think I had a good setup in game by using the firing range, only to find then that in a more practical environment when actually playing that this function I'd tied to a certain button wasn't reliable enough or was just too close to another command that I would accidentally hit, which now leads me to the next problem. There was such a high amount of misclicking for myself that I felt like eventually I stun locked myself with the overwhelming commands and flaps that I had to my disposal that eventually led me to falling into a coma for a week. I feel like this product needs something that I didn't really have, time, and something that I don't have at all, which is patience. For someone that is a very good gamer, using a product that makes me not so much of a good gamer really hurts my ego. Being above average in most games is all I have in my life, and this product was taking that away from me. So adding into the cost of this product, which is around about $178, €165 or £140 at the time of this video, it's hard to really recommend this product. If maybe you're someone that loves a challenge, likes to tinker with things, has patience and doesn't have a fragile ego, then yeah, I can see this being good for some people, but unfortunately it's just not for me. I think the price is what's going to really put people off, because to me at least it's not a product that is superior to a keyboard, nor was it really game changing. It could be that it's better for maybe a MOBA or an MMO, but I play neither of those, as the only MOBA I play which is Dota, which makes me want to die when I play it, so I just don't. So it's a product that comes down to the individual. Are you willing to put in the time and effort to make this work? If so, then buy it. If you're expecting a quick fix to you being a bad gamer, then personally I'd say that this may not be the product for you. That's all for this review. There will be links in the description pointing you to Azeron's website if you're interested in purchasing this product. I hope you enjoyed this review. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments below, and like and subscribe.